Good evening, campers. This is good seeing all these day tours. We're gonna go over homework, and then we'll go right into day 2, because it's as if we planned for this. So the first question here, use the strikes column to find where there are 2 strikes, and make a new column indicating whether the pitch was thrown in a 2-strike situation. Name this is 2 strikes. So we're gonna use the strikes column. Okay. Here's strikes. We want to find where there are 2 strikes. So if we use our loc function and we do equals 2, just like how we did it before with is in, I was showing you before, you could do description, 2 equal signs, and some other label. You could do that with numbers, of course, as well. So in this case, df strikes double equal sign 2. This will get you all the times there were 2 strike events. We're going to use a similar structure to what we did with is strike, where we're going to initialize the column with all zeros first. So we're going to create a new column called is 2 strikes, and that's going to be all zeros. And then we're going to look for only where there are 2 strikes. Then we're gonna call is 2 strikes, and we're gonna set that to 1, not 11, but 1. Oh yeah, before we get through all of that, the rumor is that people were putting in like 1, 2. That's actually, that's just line numbers, okay? So at the very beginning, when you see this like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those are actually just line numbers, chat. So that's actually not something you put in. Let's see. So if I did like don't show line numbers, it would actually look like this. It's just like just looks like this, you know? But I like using line numbers, that way people can refer to the line numbers if they're asking about a specific line of code. So don't get too twisted by the line numbers, okay? Okay, so we'll do this. And then if we do df head and we scroll all the way to the right, you'll see is 2 strikes. And so that's how you would add it. So initialize that column and then conditionally filter for 2 strikes. Then overwrite all the values inside of the is 2 strike column with 1, right? So we did this just like here when we did is strike. We did the same thing. We initialized with we'll initialize the column with 0, and then we look for all the strike events and descriptions, and then we overwrote those zeros with a 1. Is there any benefit or drawback to using 2 equal sign 0 versus declaring a variable as 2 and referring? No, so if you wanted to call this like target strikes equals 2, and then you called target strikes instead, it's going to be the same thing. So just like before, x equals 1, that's fine. You could call 1, or you could call the variable. You're doing better coding practices than what the Bootcamp is showing you, actually, if you do it this way. But for us, just like how we did it before, we could actually just put that in. It's simple enough for us to just do it this way. Are we good on question 1, chat? Can we do question 2 now? All right, question number 2. Use the release speed column to find when a pitch is thrown greater than 94 miles an hour, and name this is high velo. Okay. So using the same logic here, we're just gonna first initialize that column, is high velo. Is high velo. And then we're going to use loc again, and then we'll use release speed. And then this says greater than 94. So we'll use that greater than sign, the number 94. And then we'll get into that column is high velo, and we'll tag that with a 1. Okay. And then if we go into df head, you'll see is high velo in here, and here's a 1 here, And you can see, you can check that here. Oh yeah, that's greater than 94. 94.1 still counts. Okay, homework number 2 done. Everyone okay with homework number 2? Okay, good. Okay, homework number 3. This was a little harder. I saw a lot of people ask a question about this, and this is good because this is the start of day 2. I wanted a little challenge question in there. Using the description column and the attack zone column, when a pitch is thrown for a call or a swinging strike in the heart zone, okay? So this is gonna require 2 conditional statements. We've been so far working with just one, but you're actually able to chain multiple statements together. So I know the first thing we need is from description. We're gonna want called or swinging strike. So let's just make a column. We'll call this called strike, and then swinging strike, or I'll just call it a W, a whiff. Okay, so called strike or whiff, right? And we'll make a list, right? And so called strike is one of these things we want, right? And then we can actually even look at the unique variables, just like how we did before. Called strike's one of those. Swinging strike's another. Okay. Now, some people might put in swinging strike blocked. Some people might have put in more strike things. That's okay. That's fine. So long as you're able to put it into a list, you're doing what ultimately the question wants you to do, right? So let's go description dot is in, called strike or whiff here. And then if we just run this, right, you're gonna get 13,344 rows, right? Another way you could check this is dot shape. So the shape of your data frame right now, the shape would be how many rows and how many columns. So if we ran the shape here, it'd be 13,344 rows, 98 columns. This is the shape of our data. Okay, but what if we also wanted everything that's in the attack zone labeled heart, right? So if we wanted to do that, I'm just gonna comment this out here. I'm gonna comment that out, I'm gonna comment this out. Let's make another line of code. If we wanted attack zone equals heart, we're gonna get 12,352 rows. You could also check the shape of that, 12,352 rows. But how would you do both of them? Okay, so the way you would do both of them is you need an AND statement, okay? So I'm gonna use this attack zone heart. Now, some people may have done it this way, and this is actually not correct. It looks correct, but it is not correct. What you need to do is you need to wrap your conditions in parentheses. So this is close. If you got this part, if you got this far, that would be partial credit, okay? So what you need to do is you need to take your first statement, wrap that in a parentheses. And then you need to take your second statement here and wrap that also in parentheses. This is how you would do a multiple conditions and statement inside of your dot loc method here. How do you do that? So if you just highlight everything, you just need to highlight everything that you want to do it in, and you just put in the open parentheses, and Colab will automatically give you the closed parentheses as well. Okay. So if I highlight all of this and just do open parentheses, it will also give me the closed parentheses. If we're gonna do this, and let's just finish out this homework here, use description indicate whether a pitch is thrown for a call swing strike in the heart zone. Oh, and I didn't give it a name. Sorry, but let's do the same thing here. So df, let's call this strike heart. Strike heart equals 1. And if we take a look, you can see strikes in the heart zone. So you can see here, heart. And then, were these called strikes? This was a called strike, this is a swing strike. That's good. And we want to take a look at, say, 10 of these. I went with heart strike. Okay, yeah, I mean, that works too. That works too. So some of these, maybe they are strikes, but they weren't in the heart zone, right? Doing good? Okay, everyone caught up on homework? No more homework questions? It's okay if you have homework questions about number 3 because we're about to go into the boot camp part now. We're about to do the boot camp day 2, and it starts with this. So, okay, let's do day 2. So we're gonna do 2 things, all right? We're gonna revisit our handy dandy Excel spreadsheet. I guess it's a Google Sheets spreadsheet. So let's go ahead and open this up. We're gonna do some multiple condition stuff here. And then we're gonna take this and we're gonna do it over in our notebook, in Pandas, okay? So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create a new column. I'm just gonna right click and insert column to the right. Okay, one thing we wanna do is we wanna know when the pitcher pitches for the Reds. So I said before that this is all, these are all games where the Cincinnati Reds are playing. But some games, you know, they're home and away, and it doesn't tell us whether or not the pitcher pitches for the Reds in any of these columns. So we're gonna make a column called is Reds pitcher. We're just gonna use a formula, an if formula here. So if, we're gonna do an if statement. So when the home team is pitching, they are always pitching at the top of an inning. So when you hear like top of the first, bottom of the first, the top of the first is the home team pitching, right? So we have a column called home team. And that's here, home team, column T. And we also have away team, column U, right? And then also, we can get whether the inning is in the bottom of the inning or the top of the inning with inning top bot. And that's column AK. So if we're using this information correctly, we could get if Cincinnati is at home and at the top of the inning, then they would be pitching. Or if Cincinnati is away and it's the bottom of the inning, then they would also be pitching. Okay, so this is 2 conditions, one being Cincinnati at home and it's the top of the inning, or Cincinnati is away and it's the bottom of the inning. So we're gonna use an or statement here. And then we need to use 2 conditions, right? So we use an and statement, and T2 is if they're a home team. Right? So if Cincinnati is home, we use double quote sin. And the other part of the statement is AK, right? That's inning top bottom. And that's equal to top. So if Cincinnati is at home and it's the top of the inning, or, and we'll do another multiple conditions here, if Cincinnati is away, so that's U2, yay, 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 yay. U2? Okay. And AK2, we're in the bottom of the inning. Okay. And then let's close that entire statement, that or statement. So now, if Cincinnati is in the top of the inning, if Cincinnati is the home team and they're at the top of the inning, or Cincinnati is away and it's the bottom of the inning, if either of those things are true, then Cincinnati's pitching. And if it's not true, if either of those things are not true, then they are not pitching. And then we could just run that, and then it's gonna say, do you want to autofill this? So let's do it for all of it. You could check if it's like, oh yeah, zeros if they're not pitching, and then you could check ones if they are pitching in their home or away, and if it's bottom of the inning or the top of the inning. But I could tell you right now, given the batters from 2022 that I'm seeing here, these names and the batter names, is given some, expertise. These are not Reds batters. So that gives me confidence that this is the truth. If you want to double make sure that that's true, you could check Cincinnati, home team. And is it the top of the inning? Yes, it's the top of the inning. So that makes sense that this is a 1. We have this in our spreadsheet stuff now. So let's do that now in Python, okay? So I always like starting off with df.head just to see what the current spreadsheet looks like. And we got our homework stuff in there. Don't worry about the homework stuff. We're not going to necessarily use that for the workshop. So if you're still working on the homework, don't worry. It's not a part of the bootcamp main skills. The homework is like side quest. So if you're doing the homework, it's side quest. You don't need that to get through the bootcamp. We want to create is Reds pitcher. The first thing we want to do is Reds pitcher. Let's just initialize that column. Okay. So I put is Reds pitcher equals 0. You see that we've created a bunch of zeros in our data frame. That's good. That's good. Now we're going to do the exact same thing, exact same logic we did in the Excel sheet, in the Google sheet, except in Python, in pandas. So the first thing we need, remember, we're going to do this in parentheses, right? So I need to know, the first thing is home team. Remember, you could access the column by the label, and you don't necessarily need any indexing T or U or AK. You don't need any of that, right? So if the home team is Cincinnati, and it's the top of the inning, so inning, I think it's inning top bot. Okay, so if we do Cincinnati and it's the top of the inning, if we just take a look at that head, right? This would be, here's definitely some pitcher name in at the top of an inning where the home team is Cincinnati. So I could definitely tell you that this is Cincinnati pitching, because this is a Cincinnati pitcher in 2022. So that's 1, right? So let's comment that out. And then let's just take a look at it when Cincinnati is the away team. And then it's the bottom of the inning. Okay. Take a look at the head there. And then same thing, a lot of Hunter Strickland. Maybe we look at the tail. Let's see if we get some other names in here. There you go, Riley O'Brien. So Cincinnati away. And it's the bottom of the inning, then they're pitching. So we're doing multiple conditions here, and we're doing multiple conditions here, right? But as we know from the spreadsheet, we have one multiple condition, and we have another multiple condition. So 2 different ands. Now we need to connect that with an or statement. Right, so it's this entire thing, or this entire thing, right? So that's this entire thing, or this entire thing. So remember what I said about wrapping things in parentheses? You're gonna wrap things in parentheses again. So this entire statement here, we're going to wrap that all in one parenthesis. So I highlighted all of it, and now I'm going to just put a parenthesis around that entire thing, right? So if that entire statement is true, or if the other entire statement is true, then let's label that Reds pitching, okay? So let's do it again here. I'm gonna take this entire statement. I'm gonna take all of this, okay? Remember, you wrapped the inside of it as well in parentheses, so now we're just wrapping in parentheses again. See, it's kind of like Excel. Excel makes you wrap things in parentheses a million times as well. So we have one statement, Cincinnati, the home team, and it's the top of the inning. Another statement, Cincinnati is in the bottom of the inning, and then they're the away team. Now we're just gonna combine these two things. So I'm just gonna cut this. I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna use the pipe sign here. This would be like shift /. So this pipe, and in the world of computer science, for Python and particularly, this signifies or. So you have your ampersand for and you have pipe for or. So I'm just gonna paste this entire thing on the other side, okay? Now we're gonna do the exact same thing we did on Tuesday. We're gonna say, if any of those conditions are met, is Reds pitcher equals 1. This is a really long line of code. I'll make it look nice in a second. So we'll run through that. And now, if you do df head, let's take a look at the first 50. Is the Reds pitcher the Reds pitcher? You can see there's a lot of zeros. I could definitely see Matt Reynolds and Jake Fraley in here. And then here's Pat Wisdom and Alfonso Rivas with a bunch of ones. And then you have Zach McKinstry in there as well. And if you're following along in the spreadsheet, that's the case here too. So it starts here with Pat Wisdom. Then we got Rivas and then McKinstry here as well. Can I show you the end of the line of code again? Yeah, so I'm actually going to make this look a little nicer. There's a trick in pandas where if you wrap things in parentheses, you're kind of learning that if you wrap things in parentheses, things happen, usually for, logical reasons. It's also an easy way to make your code look a little nicer. So I'm just going to separate this onto different lines. That wasn't the behavior I had before. Looks a little gross. Looks better. Now it's on separate lines, but it's still the same code. So you can see it a little better now. .loc. Remember that first parentheses, for me it's in blue here. We go home team equals Cincinnati, and it's the top of the inning. Or the away team is Cincinnati, and it's the bottom of the inning. Now that equals 1. So let's go on. Let's move on here. Okay. One thing that we do in the world of Excel is group bys or pivot tables, right? So sometimes we want to create a pivot table, and that way we could combine or aggregate some of our information and summarize our information in a way that maybe becomes more meaningful than just one row or a few rows and trying to piece together the puzzle, right? Sometimes we want to combine our information, add it together, multiply things together, aggregate our information into a more condensed table. a summary table of some sort. If you are in Google Sheets, I'm in Google Sheets. If you're in Google Sheets, I'm going to insert pivot table. So at the very top here, insert pivot table. And it's gonna ask me, create a pivot table? New sheet with this data range? And I'm just gonna say, sure. Why not? Create. Now, this might take a second. It is creating it for me. And your Google Sheet, because I'm doing this with like extra zoomed in so everyone can read, it's gonna look like really expanded. Your columns, all of this stuff is probably gonna be more to the right of your screen, probably away from these columns. You're gonna see a lot more columns than I am, and that's okay. So we want to look for Reds pitchers only, and then if they're throwing a specific pitch for strikes. Okay, so we need who the pitcher is. So let's go get pitcher name. And we could just drag that in as the rows. I'm gonna go through this a little quick because you guys should know this information, right? So we do rows, we dragged in pitcher name. If you go all the way towards the bottom, there's a pitch name. So I'll drag that into rows as well. Pitch name. So I have pitcher name, pitch name. And then this is kind of populating. It's going through a lot of data, you know. Pitcher name, pitch name. So it should look like this. You have pitcher name, pitch name. Now let's filter, because I only want Reds pitchers, right? So let's go, is Reds pitcher? I'm gonna drag that here to the filters. And I wanna only look for if they are Reds pitchers. So, I don't want this. Okay. So now it's calculating it out. There we go. We have, I can see here, you know, Chase Anderson pitched for us in 2022. There's Graham Ashcraft. Luis Castillo pitched for us in 2022. There's Luis Sessa, who was a starter for us in 2022. All of these pitchers, familiar faces from 2022. Okay, now we want to look for is strike. So let's go is strike. We made this on day one, whether or not it was a strike. So you should have this in your Google Sheet, in your spreadsheet, and we'll drag this to values. Okay, and now it's calculating that. Okay, and now we have, oh God, I can't move this. So for this, it's giving us a sum. If I scroll over a little, you can see how many times they threw it, but I don't really care about how many times they threw it. I care about the average, which will give us like essentially a percentage of how often they threw it for a strike. So I'll change the sum to average, and it's doing a little calculation here. And now we're getting these percentages. So if you've followed along so far, and if I escape the editor, your table should look something like this. Chase Anderson, here's all the pitch types he threw, and then the average of is strike for each pitch type. Okay. Are we good? Everyone with me here? We're gonna jump into group buys now. So the first thing we wanna do is I wanna show you some tricks with the data frame, right? Like if we're doing df.loc, remember sometimes we were doing like the conditional stuff. If you don't want to do any conditional stuff, you could actually do a colon. This is just select all. And some programming languages like MATLAB, if you just do a colon, it's just a shorthand way for all the rows, right? If I wanted to select multiple columns, right? For instance, if I wanted to select only the pitcher name, the pitch name, and is strike, you can actually put that into a list. Okay? So inside, let's do this again, from loc, square bracket, colon. So you're selecting all the rows, comma. So now we're gonna put in our column statement. So before the comma is rows, after the comma is columns. I want to select only 3 columns. So I'm going to use another list, square brackets inside, pitcher name, and we're just going to list them out like how everything is kind of listed out in a list back when we did strike events, right? Pitch name is strike. All right, this is really similar to how we did it with the strike events on day 1. And if we do .head, we could get only those 3 columns, right? So we were doing .head before, and it was giving us all the columns, but then truncating the table with this ... right? So that only happens when there's too many columns to display. When we limit our data frame down to a specific number of columns, smaller amount of columns, it could display all of them if it could fit in the default view, right? So df.loc, we want all the rows, and we're getting specifically these 3 columns now. Okay. And remember, we're trying to replicate this pivot table. So we don't need all the columns to do that. We only need a few of them. Now, what if we wanted to select only the reds pitchers, conditional format, conditional filter, like we did in day 1, right? So remember when I said all the rows here, right? Let's fill in what the conditional statement would be if we wanted only reds pitchers. And remember, we have isRedsPitcher. So let's use that to our advantage, right? We created isRedsPitcher with the multiple conditions. Let's use that to our advantage here, okay? So df isRedsPitcher equals 1. Okay? So we're just replacing the colon, which is saying I want all the rows. Now I don't want all the rows. I want only the rows where the pitchers are reds, where isRedsPitcher is equal to 1, right? Just like how we did the filter, right? Just like how we did the filter and we only wanted reds pitchers, we're filtering, conditional filtering, here in pandas. isRedsPitcher equal to 1? If that's true, give me only these 3 columns. And if we run this head, now we're getting Hunter Strickland, pitch names, and then whether or not on that row, remember this is still the rows of data, we're still getting each row. So he threw a 4-seam fastball for this pitch, not for a strike. Then he threw another 4-seam fastball for a strike. And you could again do this with tail, right? If you do the bottom 5 rows. Here's Hunter Green throwing who knows what that pitch was, and they're apparently all for strikes. So you could also do head 20. So if we wanted the first 20 rows, Hunter Strickland, and then here's some Raver San Martin. Okay, so now we're going to, with our data frame, rather than doing .head and just getting the top 5 rows, we're going to use another function, and this is group by. So we're going to try to replicate this table, right? We want the average strike thrown per pitch type. Okay, so we're going to, instead of saying .head, we're going to say group by, okay? Group by parentheses, okay? So here's your df.loc conditional filter, specifically the columns that you want. Now we do group by, just like how we did head to get the top 5. Now we're going to do group by to group by or aggregate our information. Now, remember the pivot table, what are we grouping by? The two things that we ended up grouping by, right? Pitcher name and pitch name, right? And if you go into the pivot table, the editor here, that's the two things in rows. So what the pivot table is doing is it's grouping by pitcher name and pitch name. So we're going to do that exact same thing. We're going to group by pitcher name and pitch name, and we're going to use a list inside of group by. So dot group by, parentheses, make a list, square brackets, pitcher name, comma, pitch name. Close bracket, close parentheses, okay? Now, if you try to run this, you're just gonna get this, oh, you have a data frame group by object now. Well, cool, but that doesn't really do much for us if we're trying to replicate the mean, or the average, the mean of this column. So how do we get the mean out of this group by object? What if I told you, you just type dot mean, parentheses. So now we're chaining this group by function, and after it, we're gonna say dot mean. And if we run that, well, what do you know? Chase Anderson throwing a four-seam fastball at 43.7%. Chase Anderson throwing a four-seam fastball at 43.7%. So that second half here, since we've selected pitcher name, pitch name is strike, and we're grouping by two of the three columns, we're just going to take the average, the mean of the remaining column. The only thing that's left over is strike. If you ever look into a function, like if I type in pandas group by, and I look into the documentation, pandas group by, you can see pandas group by, there's actually a bunch of different things. These are called keyword arguments or key value parameters. Sometimes you'll see this labeled as keyword arguments or kwargs, KW-args. You see a bunch of different options here, like by none, axis 0, level none, as index true. These are all things you can do to your function. So we're gonna actually use one of those parameters in group by. And after the list, so after we're grouping by, I'll put a comma, because that's what the documentation here says, right? The documentation says, after you do something, put a comma. Okay. And then I'm gonna use this. I'm just gonna skip all this other stuff. I don't care about it. I'm just gonna use this. And instead of as index true, I'm gonna say as index equals false. Okay? So I'm grouping by this list, pitcher name, comma, pitch name. Then I'm gonna type in a new keyword argument here. So comma, as index equals false. Because the default is as index equals true, right? So I wanna change that. So I'm gonna say as index equals false, and I'm gonna run that. And now you're gonna get 146 rows, hopefully, and then you'll have your columns that look like this. The reason why this is important is if you wanna work with this information and call the columns, like how we've typically been calling it, square brackets and a string, or an index label in this case, then you need to what's called flatten your index. So this flattens your index. So that's another way, another term for what this looks like. If you have a multi-index table like this, This is not flat. This is multi-indexed. So to flatten it, as index false. This flattens your group by. One more thing before the question. Let's, just like how we did, remember when we imported the data, df equals read CSV, all that stuff? Remember when we did that? We're going to create a new variable. We'll call this df1. And we're going to set this equal to it, okay? So if you say df1 equals all of the stuff we just did, and then we take a look at df1 in a new cell. You could even do head if you want, but it's pretty small, so you could do this. This is fine. Now we have df1. And remember, we also have df, right? So now we have two different data frames. One data frame, our data frame that we called in, df head, and it's all this pitch by pitch. And then df1, which is our aggregated data frame, right? This is now something where we're going to functionally work with this information. But this is important because this is mimicking your spreadsheet environment, right? So this would be like your two different sheets. One sheet is all of the original data. And then your other sheet is the pivot table, the group by data. So this is df, kind of like sheet 1. And then now we have df1, which is the group by. Okay, we actually didn't get all the way to the end of this lesson, but we are hitting 2 hours. So out of respect for what I've been saying we're gonna do, we're gonna pump the brakes right here, because I think we did a lot. Things that were missing from day 2, renaming columns and merging data. But this is a good point because there's no homework for the weekend. Enjoy your Tuesday off. Maybe optional homework. Okay, I would say your best bet for homework today would be try to get, especially for a lot of you, because it was a little tough sledding for the multiple conditions. I would say try to mess around with multiple conditions. Like maybe instead of doing home team, away team is pitcher, try doing this for is the Reds batting, right? So you would inverse this. Or you might want to do like if a Red threw a fastball, go into the pitch names, right? Because for pitch names, you have a lot of different pitch names. And so maybe you want to filter and do multiple conditions on when a fastball or when a curveball or maybe a few of these different pitch types are available. Yeah, definitely try to do, like, make some new features. And that's really what it's called. So when you're separating stuff out and binarizing things, sometimes that is like the basics of feature engineering or feature creation. So sometimes these things are really important. Like in the homework, knowing what's high velocity and whether they throw it in the heart of the zone a lot. Maybe what's more important is the shadow zone. So maybe you want to make things for the shadow zone. Maybe you want to make things for slower pitches or a particular pitch type. Bootcamp day technically 2. These are the bits and donuts and subs, y'all. Thank you for the follows. If you're catching up on VOD, that's okay. Sub to the YouTube if you have. Un momento, por favor. Be more interesting. This is what I was telling Valifer at the beginning of the stream. I was like, the Zoomers like 2x. Can you add a real-time 2x speed-up factor? Yeah, give me a second. I think I have it. Here we go. I think we could do the entire thing like this. Hey, it's bootcamp time, y'all. Look, df columns of values, and then we're gonna do this unique, and then we're gonna go through this and make sure that you do some as index equals false in here. We're gonna do means, and then also we're gonna set this to a variable, dude. PogChamp.